everyone, this is Ellie Mae with Artesprix, and today I wanted to share a quick project. We're going to be using these wine bags, which make a great gift idea all year long. I'm going to use some stencils that I have actually designed and cut with my silhouette machine, but you can also order any stencils that you want. The great part, and these will be hard to see on camera because they are a clear stencil material, but the great part about stencils is that words, when they are sublimated, need to be backwards. So they need to be in reverse. So when you are using a stencil, that is very easy to do because you can just flip it over. So I have this stencil here that says celebrate that I'm going to be using. And when we go to use our techniques, I'm just going to flip that over and do my image in reverse. So when we press it, it comes out correct on my blank. So that is the great part about using stencils. The other thing with stencils is that in most cases they are reusable. So this would be reusable for as many times as the lifespan of the stencil. So let's go ahead and go through the supplies really quickly. This is a project that you can complete with the Artesprix Sublimation inks. You could complete it with the Artesprix Sublimation paints or the Artesprix Sublimation markers. It can be used with any of these products that you have on hand. So you really are not limited to just one thing. So we're going to use our basics of copy paper, ordinary plain copy paper, to transfer our design to our object. I have these Artesprix wine bag sublimation blanks. I have my stencils that I've created that you could use all kinds of different designs with. I'm going to be using the Artesprix protective paper. This is siliconized paper. This is one of the most important parts of your project so that you protect your heat press surfaces and you do not get any of this sublimation ink onto your pressing surface. So very, very important there. I'm going to be using the Artesprix heat tape, specially designed heat tape for use with a heat press with sublimation. It is a high temperature. This blank is going to be pressed at 400 degrees for 60 seconds. So you need to use a heat tape that can withstand that. And this is to keep it secure onto our blank. For this project, you'll also need a ruler. It always comes in handy to have a ruler and a pencil. Pencil does not transfer in the design process from your copy paper to your blank. So it's great for drawing templates and designing within, or even sketching out. As you can see in some of the other Artesprix videos on the YouTube channel, I've done several with just sketching. I am no way an artist, but just have some fun with it. So a pencil, and then I'm going to be using for today's project, the sublimation stamp pad with a blending brush to add that. Again, you can use this project with Artesprix stamp ink, Artesprix paints, or Artesprix markers. So you really have a choice of whatever you feel most comfortable with or whatever you think will look the best. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to set my stencils aside for just a second, and then I'm going to take this blank out of the bag. You want to measure your blank so that you know exactly where your design can be placed on this. When you are working with you're going to be pressing this flat, but when you are working with a flat blank that is going to then have something inside of it, we'll just use my hand as an example. Keep in mind that your surface could be rounded. So for a wine bottle, it's going to be a rounded object. So you really want to keep your placement of your design in the center. It can kind of go off to the edges, but you don't want the majority of your design all the way on the edges or you won't be able to read it very well. So I have already measured this because I've already created these stencils and made sure that they work. So I'm just going to take 2 of these stencils. I'm going to use Celebrate on one side, and I'm going to use Cheers on the other side. So I'm just going to set those aside here and then move what I don't need out of the way. Like I said, with stencils, if you can see this on the camera, it's clear. My fingerprints are getting all over it now. But with stencils, it's very easy to be able to reverse your text. So you could do this several ways depending on what you're working with. you could simply place it down here onto your piece of copy paper. I have a second sheet underneath and a protective mat underneath that, just so the ink won't get through. Now with this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to take a couple pieces of my heat tape here, just small, little tiny pieces, because it's what I have on hand. I'm going to tape my blank down, just so that, or my stencil down, just so it does not move on my sheet, because if it moves at all, it is going to bleed on that color. And then I'm simply going to take my black ink and my blending brush, and I'm going to start blending. So while I fill in this stencil, I'm going to speed up this video here. Okay, now a couple things, tips for working with your stencils. With stencils, you have these little things called bridges. They're little gaps in your design to hold your pieces of, say, your E or your A in place. You want to be very careful when you're going with a blending brush, or even when you're painting. You want to be careful not to catch the edges of those areas of the middle of the E and the A, because you don't want that stencil to move, because it's not, this one in particular isn't sticky, so it's not stuck to the paper. So if any part of that stencil moves, you can see here, if it lifts, it's going to go, the ink will go underneath it. Also, you can see that I got off the edges of my stencil here. That's not a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to use my pencil and kind of go on the outer edge of this, so that once I remove this, I will be able to cut that edges off, so it's not going to transfer to my blank. You could also, if you're creating your own stencils, you could give yourself more extra space. I know a lot of people like to save on materials, so they'll make the stencil down smaller, but sometimes it can be easier for you if you create your stencil longer. So here's the first one, and then I'm going to do the same method and do the second design for the other side. So we'll speed up this video as I do that. Okay, now I'm going to cover that back up so I don't make a mess. And then we have our sublimation product ready to go. So grab a pair of scissors. I missed that on the supply list, but scissors are always great to have on hand. So the first thing I want to do is I am going to go ahead and carefully remove my stencil. I'm going to keep my heat tape, and I can reuse that. So I'm just going to set it aside for a second. And then you can see I have my stencil here. Now I'll show you some things. Some of the tips. In this case, I did get a little bit more messy, and I want to show you that. So you can set your stencil aside, and then you can clean that off with some water or a wet wipe. So we'll just set it aside there. Now in this case, you can see I did get a little bit messy here, but I'm going to go ahead with it. This is what happens if you get too rough with your stencil and your stencil moves. Your brush could get in under that. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to cut off these edges here where I can see I went outside the template. Just cut that down to size. So this will be one side of it. And then set that one aside. Here is my first one. Let's see how well I did. I got a little bit in there, but that's okay. I'm good. You know, every project that you do by hand, you add a little bit of yourself into. So I'm going to set that one aside, and then I'm going to cut this one down to size. Now, this is just copy paper. Copy paper is inexpensive. If you wanted this perfect, you could definitely do it. It's just a little bit of ink, a little bit of your time, and copy paper. Right now, this is not permanent. So if you wanted to redo this to make sure that your lines are all crisp and everything is good, you definitely can do that. Completely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and press these because once I put that wine bottle in that little wine bag, that's what they're going to be getting as their gift. So this is just a little way to present that. And I am good with those. And with your burlap type materials, it gives it a little bit of a distressed look. So I'm okay with pressing it just like it is. So what we're going to do is I'm going to press one side at a time. So I'm going to line this up, and let's go ahead and cut this tag off. We don't want to press that little plastic zip thing. So let's get that out of our bag. You also want to keep in mind when you're pressing anything with drawstrings that your drawstrings, if those are under the press, those can affect the pressure, which means that your press is going to hit those first, and it's not going to get pressure down on your blank as much as it should. So you could end up with ghosting if you end up with your drawstrings inside your press. So I am just going to center this. Now, when you are working with a bag, we already talked about having it be curved when you have your object inside of it. But you also want to keep in mind, this works for any kind of bag, tote bags, wine bags. You want to keep in mind that at the bottom, whatever is going to sit in here is going to also affect the shape of it. So you don't necessarily want your design all the way at the bottom, or it's going to curve underneath your gift, whatever's inside the bag. So let's go ahead and we can place this how we would like. And you can choose if you want it to, say, celebrate this way. I think I'm going to go with this way. Then I'm going to grab, I'm just going to eyeball this. I'm going to grab that heat tape that I had previously used, and I'm going to secure my design. And I want to make sure that it doesn't move and that there's nothing between my blank and this. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this. Before I do that, I'm going to press this because it has a little crease. So I'm just going to drop it into my press where that crease is. Keep my drawstrings out and give it a quick press so it's flat. And then I'm going to let that cool just a bit. And now you can see it's completely flat. And then I'm going to set up my design on my wine bag, keeping in mind some space at the bottom. And once I have that ready to go, I'm going to grab my siliconized paper and I'm going to make sure that I have enough rolled out to cover both sides of this. In this case, we can do a sublimation sandwich. So I'm going to cut this out. This is probably the noisiest part of this whole project. And since I'm going to be pressing it twice, I'm going to pull out two. And I'll explain that in here in just a second. One of the most important parts of the entire process is you want to keep your heat press very protected. So we're going to place siliconized paper down below. So that's our first layer of our sublimation sandwich. We're going to put our blank on top of that with our sublimation print is on top of our blank. Your sublimation print is what you want on the heat surface of your press. So I'm going to I'm going to press this inside, flip over my protective paper and crease that there. This is what makes our sublimation sandwich. Now when I go to put it in the press, I need to be mindful of these drawstrings. So I just want to make sure those are outside of my press, but that my surface is still protected here in this area. For when you sublimate, sublimation ink turns into a gas, it's going to be transferred to the blank. If you do not have your surface protected, those gases can get out from under that paper and could transfer to your press. This means that ink could then be transferred to future projects. So you really want to use this siliconized paper every single time and make sure you have excess so you're not getting anything on your heat press surface. So I'm just going to move this to my heat press and I'm going to press this for 60 seconds at 400 degrees. Okay, I'm going to carefully release my press. Just kind of let it lift it up slowly. And then you can let it sit there for just a couple seconds while it's cooling. And then I'm going to bring this back over. It's going to be extremely hot. So 400 degrees for 60 seconds, very, very hot. So here, I am not sure you can see it on camera, but I'll try and, you can see the ink in this protective paper. That means you do not want to reuse this protective paper or it could transfer to your next project. So we're going to take that and we're going to throw that away. And then let's turn this around and we can do our little snake. Ooh, look at that black. That black turned out very, very nice. So you're going to still see some ink on there. That's okay. This is your transfer. So this one turned out very, very nice. What I'm going to do is I'm then going to flip this over and maybe we'll do a little comparison on A or B. Do you like the letters going up, down, or on this side? We will flip it around and let's do the letters going up. I am going to cut this little edge off, which is good because there's a little piece of ink there that I missed. That's going to help me in aligning this. And then since my blank is already flattened and you can see the seam is off just a little bit, just make sure to account for that when you are placing it. And I'll grab some more heat tape here and secure that. And sometimes I may go a little bit overboard on the heat tape, but I want to secure that blank in place. I do not want it to move, and I'd rather use a little bit extra tape to guarantee that because your sublimation ink is permanent. So again, I'm going to grab my siliconized protective paper, lay it down flat. I'm going to set my blank inside of it with my print facing up, and I'm going to fold it over for my sublimation sandwich. And then I'm going to repeat the same steps to make sure that my drawstrings are outside of my press. And let's press this for 60 seconds. Okay, slow release here. And then let's take a look at how it is. Again, I can see the lettering in the protective paper, so don't reuse that. So I'm just going to slide this out of here. And then carefully, as it's hot, take a look at this. Ooh, now here's where I mess up. But it's really not too bad that you see that. And then let's take a look at some of the finished photos. Now here's a closer look at the cheers side, and then on the other side with the celebrate. Which one do you prefer? The words going top to bottom or bottom to top? Let us know in the comments below. Have fun creating these custom wine gift bags and make sure to check out all the other videos on the Artesprix YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us.